Okay, so it's Andy Sandham. So a quick Halloween special with regards making a scary Halloween runaway train for an external project. So I'm going to try and do this as quickly as possible. So let's get started. So assuming you've set up your phone with the Oculus app, you've signed in, you've turned on developer options, you've got your Oculus GO turned on with the correct license code, which I'll show you in a minute. But so the first thing you want to do is you want to bring in the Oculus package from the asset store, which will give you access to the scenes folder. So if we go to gear, VR control, so this will give you the camera rig. Okay, so if we control C that, and then I will go back to assets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new folder called Andy Assets, so I don't get mixed up with everything else. Let's make some a scenes folder. So if we make a new scene, and then what I'll do is up here I'll go Control V, and then we've got the OVR camera rig, delete out the main camera, and so if we save that scene as let's call it Halloween train. Okay, so put it in Andy Assets and Scenes. Okay, so that's got us set up. The other thing I should point out is if you want to get rid of this stupid thing here, so we just turn the canvas off. So this gives you, I think this is there basically to give you the stats of your headset when you turn it on. So let's just turn that off. Okay, so step one done. Okay, so I just mentioned that I mentioned the signature code that you need to deploy to your Oculus GO. So if we go down to plugins, is that correct? I don't think that is correct. So assets, plugins, here we are. So you make a new directory called plugins, Android assets, and then this text file will basically give you the code that you need. I'll just click on it to show you. Actually, I won't click on it to show you. So if you look up here, that's basically the code it's giving you, which is my Oculus GO. So you need this to deploy to your Oculus GO. So we want to just check the build settings. So we want to add the open scene. You always want to do that. I always forget to do that. So on Android, this is all fine, I think. So it's not. We've not. Okay, so we have. It's recognised it. That's fine. So let's go to the player settings. So let's call this Halloween horror train. And also on the XR settings, we've got the Oculus. This is all fine. Yep, that's all fine. Okay, so we can close that down again and just save the scene again, or save the project. Okay, the minimum API level. So this all comes in with your Android SDK that takes about a month to install, but you want to go to the lowest, or the minimum API level is 5, and the highest will be 27. Okay, which is 8.1. So that is that set up. And finally, just to note that the .com or the .com dot, this should be your company name. So I'm going to put in my actual company name. Oh, hello. And then the project name. Oculus. So let's call it Halloween horror train. So I'm assuming that this updates automatically. Yeah. Okay, so that's fine. So let's just make sure that's all fine. Yep. Just click over here. Yep. Okay. And finally, just to note, that you want to, just so that we make sure that everybody has got this on the same page, so that you don't end up trying to deploy and it doesn't work, which obviously is a nightmare. So you want to make sure you've got all your SDK, JDK paths set up correctly. So that's in Unity Preferences and External Tools. So if you look at the previous video, this will tell you how to set these up. Again, this comes out of where you install your SDK to, or your Java files. Okay, so with all that set up, let's hope, fingers crossed, that we will be able to deploy. So I'm going to bring in my assets now, or my model of the train, which is a subway train that I have purchased off Turbo Squid for the princely sum of $2. So the big problem with this is, if you bring in FBXs, I've found that Unity never ever seems to be able to actually bring in the FBX with the textures, or it won't recognise the textures with the model. So one of the best ways of bringing it in is a .obj. So if I bring in the material and the texture file all at the same time, it should recognise it. So let's just have a look and see if this works. Having said all that, it probably won't. Okay, so it's just bringing that in, so I'll give that a moment. Okay, so I actually thought this hadn't worked, but it has. So here we have a very basic set of textures that are sitting in a very strange place. Let's just get the camera rig. So that is at 000, so let's get the train, and let's just reset the position on that. So it's still not sitting. Okay, so we're having some strangeness there, but so now we should be able to see. I've aligned the train interior with the camera rig, so we can actually see it with regards to camera rig. So I don't understand why that's doing that, but always watch this, because if you wheel in on your game view, then the resolution will appear to drop. It's simply because of the fact you've just scaled your viewport, which confuses a lot of people, including me. Okay, so next up we want to I want to basically animate this train. So I'm not going to animate it in an external package, because I just want it to rumble. So I don't want to put on a camera shake onto the OVR camera rig, because that is going to be a little bit less controllable than just animating this object with a very basic rumble. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so I want to make this carriage rumble. So the best way of doing that is to not animator. I always get confused between these two, because they're virtually the same. So we've got the animation window, drag it over here. So Unity, being easy to use as ever, tells you that it will create an animated and an animation clip for you. So I want to make a new folder called animation, and then go into that folder and I'll call it train rumble. Okay, so this then gives us our timeline, so we can start adding keyframes into this. So normally you'd animate in an external package, but I am playing this by ear, as I haven't done this for a while. But add property, so we want to transform it, so let's do that. Okay, so position, rotation, scale, so position, yes. So we've got a position keyframe now, so I think if I press record, I can then move my okay, so I need to be able to play that. It's not happening. Okay, so I've got, can't quite, oh, here we are. Okay, so you need to grab it in this blue bar up here. Okay, so which most of you probably figured out, but I didn't. So let's move forward a bit. So I'm assuming that's 0.05 of a second. So if we just play this, we can see that we're going to want it to rumble a couple of times during this time period. So if we wheel out on the mouse, I think I'm pretty much going to want to move these to make it at least, well, let's say 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to press record here. And then I am going to grab hold of my train FPX, which I think I have got keyframes there. Actually, that's probably so, and then a little bit this way, and then a little bit that way. Well, that's probably too much, and down, and then up a little bit, and then okay, so I think I'll come back to you after I've put all these in without boring you to death. Okay, so I've been fiddling with this animation to make it less awful, so I've made the movements much smaller. It's still not the most fantastic animation in the world, but the loop of these small movements give the impression of a train moving down tracks, so that should kind of do, and certainly I can give this to my animation colleague who can have a look and make it look nicer. But so the next thing we want to move on to is I think we will want to make sure that this animation is looping again, and then perhaps sound or lighting. So here's a little tip when you're a developer, a game developer. If you're working in industry, you'll have a producer scheduling you, so you don't really need to think about the next job down the line. But if you're doing it yourself, it's quite often demotivating to think of the enormous stretch of jobs you have ahead of you. So I would just, a tip is just to kind of focus on the next 1 or 2 jobs ahead of you and just keep moving forward, so to avoid becoming demotivated. Okay, so let's keep going. So we'll note that this is looping, and it does, the animation that I've created does loop automatically, but if we look at why that's happening, so if we go to the controller, this will open up the animator window, just to confuse you. So this is your states, your animation states. So on the entry point it'll go to your train rumble state, and then if we play it we'll note that we can see this is quite useful in real time to work out what's going on if you have issues with your animations, but we can see that it's just looping. So to check why that's happening, if we go up and double click on the train rumble, we can see that it's got loop time up here. So that's just if you want to turn that off, just so you know where to find it. Okay, so let's get moving. So if this is going to be a train journey into hell, we obviously don't want a lovely gentle light flapping about in the scene. So we've got our directional light, which is the default, but just make sure you've got lighting turned on in your scene, and just make sure as well that you have cast shadows and receive shadows on your object. So I quickly want to, we don't want this lovely blue sky in the background, so if we go to window and lighting and settings, so we've got this default skybox. There is a pitch black skybox somewhere, but I don't know where that's gone. So what I will do is we just want a, we basically just want a dark black, okay, for the skybox. So this is the environmental light, and it's coming from the skybox. I don't know why it's blue, but so okay, let's just see if that's just in the scene view. Okay, this might be to do with the fact that it's running the GO camera. Right, so let's just close that up. Let's just run that again. So as we can see, it's all very grey now. So we're going to want to put something outside these windows, obviously. Okay, so let's get working on that. Okay, so I'm going to go to a build. I don't want a lovely. I want a terrifying horror light. Well, perhaps not quite as intense as that, but let's just leave that for the moment for the purposes of entertaining myself. So build settings, let's build. We've got the scene included. Let me just save the scene. Okay, so it's all good. So we want to go to is it that? It is that. So let's put a build folder in here. Okay, it's already got a folder called build. So yeah, let's just overwrite that. In fact, let's not overwrite that, let's call it something else. Hell train. Okay, we're looking for a success down here, so let me just turn this off while it works out its build. Okay, so it's built and given us a succeeded notification down here. Succeeded. Okay, so in the console. So the next thing we want to do is, so it's written out to my build folder within the Ghost Train project, so as we specified. So the next thing is, if I can get hold of it, so this is the Android data bridge, Android something bridge. So this is basically what connects your computer to the Oculus GO. So you need to, these are my previous projects, Ethan scale test, so we need to drag the APK into here, and then we are going to need to go to the console or command prompt. So let me just get to the correct directory. So yeah, install. So oh, hang on a minute, let me just check that we are connected. So list of devices attached, we've got nothing, so let me just get everything turned on. Okay, so I've just turned my Oculus on, and it's given me a little Windows notification that something has been attached. So this is the device we want. So you basically need to look in your Google headset and make sure that it's actually activated, as in turned on. So let's ADB install. You would have thought there would have been an easier way of doing this, but it seems we are still in the 80s with regards VR. Right, let's try that. So we're looking for a success on this. This is a relatively large project. So success, happy days. So that means I should be able to see this now within my window on the Oculus GO and activate it from the Oculus GO. I should check that now. Okay, so that's working in the headset. So we basically the frame rate seems to be okay. The lighting, the shadows are going crazy, so we're going to need to bake those in, and my head is sticking out of the top of the carriage, but other than that it's fine. I'll see if I can get an emulator running so you can actually see what we're looking at. Okay, so the first step is relatively complete. Okay, so I was considering baking in the lights on the train, but I've realised, and this is something you will realise when you're developing, is that you'll kind of keep changing your design as you progress. So what I've done is I've realised that what I really want to do is have lights streaming past windows to give the impression of speed, and I've realised that's also going to give me an opportunity to black out the cab, as frequently happens on tubes between stations. It's a bit cliched, but what I can then do is make a shadowy silhouette appear at one end of the carriage randomly. So I've started in this process and I'll talk you through what I'm doing. Okay, so I've dragged in some old scripts or classes. So I'm not a programmer, and I wouldn't want to be, but I shall talk you through these really badly written scripts. But so I'll discuss these in more detail in a separate video, which I'll call something like programming for designers. But so what the idea here is that I have a spawn point that I've placed in the level, which is invisible, so it's kind of like an object manager, and then one of these scripts called spawn object, which I'll just show you over here. So basically this just instantiates a prefab, which is just at the minute is just basically a block. So I've just created a block called station light, and I've just dragged it into my public variable. So the spawn location, I've also dragged that in, which is the wherever I position this object. So that's just a vector 3, so it's got X, Y, and Z in there. And so the spawn time, obviously that'll be the time between spawns. So let's just play this and I'll show you what happens. So it's just spawning blocks basically. So if I just increase the spawn time, and let's just see if I can show you what's happening. Okay, it's still not quite correct. I'm just trying to show you that there's a gap between the blocks spawning. Okay, there you go. So you can see that my prefab is effectively just this block. It spawns and then it's destroyed. So the other two scripts are on my prefabs. So I've put scrolling script and destroy object script. So again, this is probably supposed to be in the same script, but it's a lot easier for me to just create modular classes so that I can just plug them in when I need them. That's the way that I like to do it, although a programmer is probably screaming as I talk. So this is a vector 3 position. So on a vector 3 speed, so basically it's got a direction either in X, Y, and Z, and I've just made it move in -1 in the Z direction. So this is basically just a transform script. I'll see if I can find it for you. So I also had an option for locking it to the camera because it was for an endless runner, but this is unnecessary in this case. So it's basically just the movement, vector 3 movement, and the speed and direction is just working around delta time. And so it's just pushing the block along, and then on the actual prefab, again, it's just going to, what will happen is it'll just look at this destroy script, and again I've just given it a time, so it's really basic, it's not anything clever, it's just it spawns, transforms along this path, which in this case is the Z path, and then destroys itself. As I said, probably programmers are probably at this very moment having a hernia, but that's really the simplest way of me understanding scripting. So the point of this exercise is, if I run it, that I'm going to attach a light to this prefab, so consequently as it goes past the windows, it's going to light up and illuminate the inside of the cab in real time. This is sort of partially nightmarish because it's VR, and you want to be optimizing it and keeping your dynamic lights to a minimum, but considering the size of this model, I'm kind of hoping I'm going to get away with it. So I shall attach a light and see what happens. Okay, so I have put in, I've adjusted the distances, I've put in a light that casts shadows, which is probably going to cause a VR nightmare, but it's looking pretty good. I've made it slightly yellow to simulate the effect of station lights. Probably actually need a physical object going past the window. So I'm going to need to check this to make sure that we aren't effectively stopping the frame rate on the Oculus GO, but I just quickly wanted to show you. So if you want to create a prefab, so I've got a prefab here, this spotlight that is also seems to have a prefab spotlight attached to it. But if you want to create a prefab obviously if you adjust one of them, it adjusts all of them. which means it's just spawning loads of the same prefab object. But if you want to create a prefab, you can just create your object in the scene, and then if you, for instance, were to add components, let's say we add the destroy object script to that, and then if I want to make that into a prefab, I'll drag it into my prefabs folder. Note if you have it, you'll note that it's a blue box effectively. So you can delete that out of the scene now, and then whenever you take that cube in, the prefab will have the destroy object script on. So that's just a quick way of, you need to drag your objects from the scene into the project folder to create a prefab. Okay, so I'm going to just have a little bit of a fiddle with the timings and spacings, and then I shall test it. So I'm just adding the white actual visible light panel to the prefab. So I've dragged the prefab into the scene. This is the prefab, or a version of the prefab, an instance of the prefab is what I'm trying to say. So I'm just positioning this in relation to the carriage so that we can see up to the windows. So you can also put this in ISO view to get a better positioning view, so I probably need to move that up a bit to be in line with the windows. Although saying that, it's actually to do with the spawn point, so it actually needs to be much lower because it'll actually be spawning up here. So if I was to move that up to where the spawn point is, yeah, and then we can position it a bit more clearly. Okay, so it needs to be right in there as well. So if we go to the top view now, okay, so it needs to be there. Okay, so back to ISO view. So what I'm going to do is, in my Andy Assets folder, I'm going to create a materials folder. So what I'm going to do is just create a bright white material and see what that looks like. I don't want to add any particular effects because it's going to slow down the scene even more. So bright light. So that's fine. Yeah. Shininess, smoothness right down, and maybe smoothness right up, and smoothness right down. Okay, I mean, you can make it emissive, but I've got a funny feeling that's going to slow it down even more. So let's just try dragging that onto there, or not, as the case may be. So that obviously is a white text anyway, so I might have to make it emissive. Okay, let's just have a look. Okay, so I've just clicked on emission, I've clicked on HDR, and I've just brought up the colour wheel and made it white, so you can see now that it's actually bright white. So we don't want to slow things down even more, but let's just try that out. So what I need to do is I need to attach that to my station light, and then to make that into a prefab again, drag it down here. I've put it in the wrong folder, it needs to go into the prefabs folder. So I can't put it in the prefabs folder probably because there's one already in there, so let me just try that again. Let me just delete that. So if I go to my prefabs folder, okay, and then drag in my station light. If I could just stop doing that. Yeah, I'll just make it station light 1. So if I now delete out station light and then just rename the station light again, this is my new prefab, and then what I'm going to have to do is on my spawn light left object, it's now going to be missing the spawn object because I deleted it. Drag that back in there, and let's just delete this one out of the scene. Okay, so let's just try that now, see if we can see the. Okay, so obviously that's not in entirely the right position, but you get the correct effect. So I'm just going to reposition the actual light on the prefab. Okay. Okay, so I'm probably going to get shouted out here again by my ex-colleagues or my colleagues, but this is the way I've always done it. So I've had a bit of fiddling with the position of the exterior light, or the position of this emission block, and it seems that when the at runtime the model of the train hops up in the air, so rather than spend loads and loads of time trying to figure out why that's happening, I've frigged it, which is the good old fashioned way that we used to do it. So what I've done is I've just basically done it by eye, but the other thing that I've done is I've cheated it because of the fact that these windows don't seem to be properly alphaed, so they're not properly transparent. So what I'm actually doing is I'm letting the object run through slightly inside the windows. So these are obviously jutting out more, so it doesn't show through these, but it gives the impression that it's actually on the outside of the windows, but in fact it's on the inside, so that saved me a lot of bother. And seeing as this isn't a paid project, then I'm not going to waste a huge amount of time on it. That's scoping. Okay, so next up I've just added in a illumination for the central part of the carriage, and the reason I've done this is that I want to hide a character in the shadows at the back here, or perhaps one even closer, so these will become visible as the lights go past. So I think I can probably get away with, I'm going to try it with just this spotlight and this one dynamic light and the sound effects, and so that should be enough. I'm hoping. I might have to put another light on the other side. Alternatively, I'll have a look. But the next thing I want to do is I want to get a character and drop it into the scene. Okay, so the next step is to get a character out of mixamo. Saves a lot of time. So we don't want anything too terrifying, as it's secondary school students. I'm not even convinced that we want a zombie, to be honest with you, so I'll just choose a character, and then what about this fella? So we're really just going to want a character and an idol. I'll just wait until the text is coming. I'm not entirely... right, he's got a sword stuck through his middle. Okay. Okay, let me choose a character. Okay, so I'm going to choose this character because in the dark he's not going to look too intimidating, and he's what appears to be a New York cop. So I'm on characters up here, so let's download. You need to be part of the Adobe Creative Cloud to get access to this, so I need to sign in. Whoops a daisy, so I'm just going to have to sign in again. Hang on, I'll do all this. Okay, so I'm signed in now, so I've got a character Derek, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to download this. So we want an FBX or Unity. Actually we don't, we want a .dae because this gives us a zip file, which means we actually get the textures, which never ever come out if you download it as an FBX. So I'm just going to download this and I'll come back to you in a moment. So next up I just want to download an animation for Derek. So I just want an idle. He doesn't want to be doing anything, he just wants to be standing there looking terrifying. Zombies don't tend to scratch the floor with their foot when they're bored. So we want it to be some sort of visible motion, because often in VR you can't really tell subtle movements. So zombie idle. Okay, it's a zombie idle where he's telling somebody to move away from him. Let's have that one. Okay, so very strange idle, but okay. So let's download that with skin. We don't need the skin. Well, do you know what? Just to make sure it works, let's just do that. Okay, so I'll download that. Okay, so I've just dragged my files in as per with assets in Unity. So I found that because I brought the skin in with because I brought the skin in with the animation, that means we don't have to fiddle around organising, although it does look like it's inside out. Is it inside out? Let's have a look. So you'll note that he's not animating, he's not inside out, which is good. So what I need to do is I need to take the zombie idle and place it up there, and then it makes a animation controller. Okay, so if we close it up, there's an animation controller now for Derek. So let's just check Derek out. Okay, so Derek's now animating. It's as simple as that basically. He's not looping, so this is the interesting bit. I need to remember how to. So okay, so if we just look at the import settings for the Derek zombie idle, we go to loop time and apply. So now we should have a looping Derek if we're really lucky. Really strange animation. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger him on and off in a similar fashion to the lights, so that he pops in and out and scares people. Okay, that's next. Okay, so we want this guy to spawn, so we can spawn him at the same time as everything else, but I want him to appear much less frequently than the other spawn items and hang around for much longer. So I want to check in the right hand view when I can actually start to see this character, which at the minute I can't see anything at all. Here he is, it's because I'm facing the wrong way, I see. Okay, so I mean that's fairly creepy in itself. So is he facing the correct way? So he appears to be facing the correct way now, so let's get him over by the doors. Let's get him in the light. So I don't know what that's going to. Let's just see what that looks like when he gets illuminated. So of course he's jumped out of position again because of the fact that the animation seems to start 5 feet in the air. So let's just move him up there. Okay, so you can kind of see him there. So I think it needs to be a bit bigger. You're not really going to see his animation at all. Okay, so I'm going to fiddle with this positioning and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so here's another little tip. So at runtime, if things are being a bit weird, to save yourself lots of messing around, you can position this this character or whatever you'd like to position at runtime, and then obviously once you turn this button off, it'll flip back into its previous position. But what you can do, excuse me, you can use your snipping tool. As long as you've got this selected, then you can save the position. So this will effectively be the origin point of where you want your character to spawn, assuming that looks okay. I mean, it doesn't look fantastic, but I think in headset you're definitely going to see that, guys. So next up I'm going to place a zombie spawn point in the scene at this position, and then we are going to spawn him. So I should note that I've scaled our zombie up, so what I'm going to need to do is drag him back into I'm going to need to make a new prefab, so let's call that, just to make sure, big. Okay, so we know that that's the big version of that. So we've got the position laid out here, so let's delete him out of the scene. And let's have a look at my snipping tool again. So let's just copy this spawn light left, Control D. Let's rename that spawn zombie cop. So I'm taking you through all of this just so that you know at all points what I'm doing. Spawn zombie cop. Okay, so let's have a look at the positions. So we want to once more get this up. So first position is 0.75. Unfortunately, you can't cut and paste. I think you can actually cut and paste during runtime, but obviously I wasn't smart enough to do that. 1.959. Okay, and then 3.41. 3.41. Okay, so that's the zombie cop is going to spawn at that point. So on the zombie idle big, we need to add a script which will be destroy. We don't want him to be scrolling, I hope, unless that could be very terrifying if he suddenly starts flying towards you through the carriage. But let's just stick that on and let's try so. So it wants to be in multiples of 2 because the so that he disappears. Well, actually that's not right. It actually doesn't want to be a mod. So the lights are going to spawn every 2 seconds, so let's just try and spawn him in between the lights, which I think he'll still be visible popping in, but as I say, this, when I just scope this, I can get this done as quickly as possible. So let's just try it out and see what happens. So destroy time 7, yeah. So spawn zombie cop, it's not the station light, spawn time, so let's put that every 4 seconds. So I can add another one of these. So yeah, let's try, yeah, okay, let's just try that. Move that in there like that, like so, and then let's have a look and see what happens. So the zombie cop has spawned the wrong way around, although our lights have now stopped spawning for some reason, so I'll just check out why that's happening. Okay, so as you can see, I seem to have somehow deleted out the previous spawn point, so let's just Control Z that back and see. Spawn light left, that's still fine, so I don't know why that suddenly moved, but okay, so this is the one that I was looking for. Spawn zombie cop. So I'll just go through the same process again and come back to you. Okay, so that appears to be working fine. I'm not actually sure. No, so he's coming at scale 111. Is he the right scale? Yeah, he's the right scale. Okay, so he's spawning in, he's not destroying, and there's more and more of him spawning. If we look over here, so the destroy obviously isn't working, and he's not facing the right way. Okay, so that means he needs to be rotated 90 degrees. Okay, so I'll just fix those things. Okay, so I've put the zombie cop. He's just appeared, so I put him on. Let me have a look. So I put him on spawn time 12, and then he disappears after 6, I think. 6, yeah. So this seems to work. So, and that's quite creepy the way it disappears. You can't really see it, although I will have to test in the headset. But so when he disappears, I'm going to want to time him in, perhaps moving slightly closer, just to scare the living daylights out of the poor students. Okay, so he's spawning okay. So I've just copied the spawn point so that we can respawn. I just thought it might be scarier once he disappears from here to actually respawn him pretty much in front of the viewer or the user or the player, even though it's not actually a game. So again, I've got a feeling this may be a little bit too scary for younger audiences, but I'm just going to try it out anyway to see what happens. I can delete it out afterwards. But so really what I want to do is I want to, using my brain, so this one spawns at 12, so and then it lasts for 6 seconds, so 12 plus 6, if I can use my brain box, I think that's 18. So the closer cop needs to spawn at 18. So, and then if he disappears at 6, is that going to work? Okay, so let's just try that out and see what happens. So just checking out in this window. Okay, so he's appeared there. And then he's disappeared and he's appeared in front of you. Okay, so let me just check these timings. Okay, so I've realised using my impressive scripting and mathematical knowledge that to avoid these two, so that I can actually sync up these things appearing and disappearing, I need the spawned zombie to spawn the other zombie before it drops out, so or before it is destroyed. So I'm going to need to attach this script to the zombie to the spawn spawn object. Okay, so we need to drag in the location, so this is going to stay the same or not, as the case may be. Okay, sorry, the spawn object needs to be 1. Okay, so let's just see if I can get it's going to have to be, can I do that, I wonder? Spawn location, I don't know why it's not allowing me to do that. So okay, so it's not allowing me to do that because it's a prefab. Let me have a think. Okay, so I've just been messing about for about half an hour. So just to avoid synchronization issues between these two characters appearing, I've had to trigger the second zombie character from the first zombie character. So if we watch here, so this is the one at the back, and then he disappears and reappears here. So again, it's a lucky accident that you often find in development that I've because of my lack of scripting ability, I couldn't get the rotation. Well, I just put in the default rotation values, and so he defaulted into facing away, and then I realised that's the sort of classic horror film position, so that you can't see what the character is doing or looking at, so facing away from you. So I basically had to put a new script on as soon as the first zombie spawns, he's got a script on him on the prefabs. I've now made 2 prefabs, spawn 1 and spawn 2. So spawn 1 has got the spawn specific object script on. So this effectively is a coroutine, starts a coroutine that waits for 6 seconds. So you'll notice that the destroy time on zombie 1 is 6.1 seconds. So that means it has just enough time to spawn this script. So this is basically, this activates immediately as soon as the zombie is spawned, and then at 6.1 seconds the zombie and everything on him is destroyed, at which point this has just triggered the new zombie, and then the new zombie effectively just has a timer on it that destroys him at 4, so it doesn't give anybody a heart attack. So coroutines is something that I'll have to discuss. So it's just basically allowing me to put a timer on before it spawns. This is the default rotation, and this is me just putting in the actual specific positions of where it's going to spawn, because that's not going to change, which I have got from here. Well, I've actually got from meddling about and trying different values. Okay, so that's that. So next up, I need to test it, which I should have done ages ago, but I haven't, and then we'll get some sound effects in. Okay, so next up we are going over to Freesound, so you get all your super cool sounds here. So let's have a look at subway train. So we want something that's quite noisy. We can obviously make it loud, but we want something unpleasant because that's going to add to the intense experience. So I will go through these, download one, and then we'll stick it into Unity. But I'll put all the links to all of the assets that have been used and anything else useful at the underneath the video. Okay. Okay, so I've got a short clip here that is unfortunately only 2 seconds, so I'm going to have to try and loop this, but also we can add them together. So I can. This isn't not quite as intense as I'd like, but I can add it with this one. And that should also help cover up the loop. Again, this time sound designers will be cursing me, but let's have a go and see what happens. Okay, so back into Unity, hopefully for the final time, and let's create a sounds. Let's make it cool and youth style, just to entertain myself. Let's just drag these sounds in. So that's a big one. And then, as usual, let's just have a look at the import settings. Okay. So I'm just going to basically drag this into the scene. Let's just see where the camera rig is, and then it's almost at the origin of the scene. So let's just drag that in. And let's just drag that in. And let's reset this to the origin. Let's reset. Whoops. And let's reset this to the origin. So if we run it now, it's going to be loud. So some Dutch people talking. So this is the one that we want, and we want to loop it. I'm not sure what this is going to sound like. Okay, so that the London one is good. The other one sounds a little bit out of place because obviously it's in train accelerating. So let's just turn that off. So you've got a little tiny hiccup there on the when it loops. So I'll try and fix that. So I've got two really nice kind of breaking sounds that I'm going to have to fade in and out. This one in particular, watch your ears. So these in effect sound like horror music in themselves, so I'm going to just fade these in and out, so I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I've just basically, a lot of these have got fade ins and fade outs anyway, so I don't need that anymore, so I'll just delete that. So I've just added all these into the scene and put it on loop, and then so all of these together on loop, basically drowning out the loop, the noticeable loop sounds. So I'll just give you a quick example. So watch your ears. So as you can see, we've basically got what sounds like a partial horror soundtrack anyway, with what it appears a little bit like the noise of violins screeching. But You'll notice that in normal horror films you usually have a sting when a creature or an enemy appears, so I don't think we need one for the guy at the back, but I think we're going to need a sting for the guy at the front because it comes across as a little odd when he just appears without any impact. So I am going to dig out a sting and then I'll see what I can do about adding that into the scene. So I've just been hunting for horror sting. This is a pretty good one. So I'm going to have to make that heard over the sound of the train, which is going to be quite difficult. I have to fiddle with the volumes, but I'm going to download that. Okay, so I've had to create a script for activating an audio source. So this is the important part of the script. Require component type of audio source. That means you have to give it an audio source before it will play it. Audio source, audio data. On start, it will get the component and play it. So basically, I know you're thinking, what an amazing scripter, and I mean, you'd be partially correct, but also the most important thing that you can ever probably have access to is the Unity documentation, which is the scripting API. So usually when you search, this will pop up anywhere, but basically I've just copied this script out here and just deleted out all the nonsense about pressing buttons. So this is a really good way of learning, and as I say, this will normally pop up when you search for Unity scripts or pieces of C# code. Okay, so what I've done is I have on the prefabs, on mixamo, on the second zombie that spawns, I've just added the script which isn't called audio source, or it should be called play script. Okay, so basically I've added the script on. I just dragged my script onto the play audio, so that's what it is. And so with play audio, it's now given me this is the script I've dragged on, because we've put in the require component. It's given me this box here, which means I have to supply an audio source. So what I have done is I've added Bedlam's Violin scare. I'm just going to quickly check these to make sure that I want to keep them all about 0.6 because obviously at the minute it's deafening. So let's just see if the guy appears with a terrifying sting. Okay, so I guess that pretty much works. Again, you did hear the loop restarting on the train sound, but as I said, this is not supposed to be perfect. But for a quick kind of horror experience for Halloween, I think that's going to do it. I'm just going to test it now. Otherwise, if there's no issues, I will call it a day. Okay, so just to finish what I've started, just to show you again, run quickly through this. So build settings, let's just make sure we've got the so we don't need Halloween train anymore, we need train stations, which is the scene that I'm in. So we want to, we've got everything set up over here. We've got the name of the company, we've got the name of Halloween Horror Train. So let's build. So we want Hell Train. I'm not going to overwrite it, I'm just going to call it something slightly different. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to build. Okay, so I've got Halloween Hell Train. It's come out to my builds folder, so I just need to drag that over to ADB, which is the Android D bridge, which I can't remember what the D stands for. And so the next thing we want to do is I'll drag down my command prompt. So I'm still in the ADB folder on C. So ADB devices to make sure that the Oculus GO is turned on. Okay, so that's the Oculus GO, and then we want to do ADB install, and then I shall make life difficult for myself by copying this instead of just using the same name as I previously did. ADB install Okay, let's go for it. Okay, so it is attempting to overwrite the previous version, so I need to go in and delete that first, so give me a second. Okay, so this is what it's having the issue with, because this is what the package name is called. It doesn't matter what the file name is called, so it is trying to overwrite the previous file. If I just get that out of the way. So you don't need to put APK on the end, so you need to put ADB at the front as ever. Uninstall ADB, uninstall Halloween. What's your caps? Okay, so it doesn't know what that is. Okay, so let me have a look at what's going on here. So this ADB shell PM list packages shows all the packages, because I can't seem to find the actual name of the bloody package that I'm trying to uninstall. Uninstall, I'm sure I've already done this, but let's see if I can I copy and paste? Okay, so you'd assume that that would work. Success. Okay, happy days. So ADB install right, let's not messing about. Give me that. Let's have it. Okay, shouldn't take too long. Success. Alright, happy days. So I shall see if I can get the Oculus GO screen up on the PC screen. Okay, so here we are. Here it is. So we're in the library. I'm just going to go up to apologies if the sound's a bit weird. My headset, obviously I've taken my headset off. So unknown sources. That's what you click on, and then this should be. Let's just come back out of here actually. So let's go to home, because I've just updated it. So, and then back to library, unknown sources, and then Halloween Horror Train. Yeah. Yes, record audio. Well, if you want, yeah, no problem. Okay, so Unity logo. Okay, right. Okay, yeah, that is pretty creepy and a little bit weird, because I appear to be sitting cross-legged on the floor. Okay, so I've lost my navigator. There it is. Hello. So let's quit that, and that should do it. Okay, thank you, and good night.